Cleveland Browns are going to be the story of the offseason, and well, we all know why. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Cleveland Browns. I want to talk about what they did in free agency, what they did in the draft, and what they look like both on offense and defense. And lastly, I want to talk about why this Browns team kind of confuses me. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So the best way to start this video off is by talking about what they've done so far this offseason. We'll really quickly gloss over their free agency because they didn't do too much. And then of course, we'll talk about what they did in the draft, which is a lot more interesting. In free agency, again, very quiet. The only real notable thing they did was, of course, was bringing back Myles Garrett on a 4-year, $40 million per year type contract. We'll go in more detail and have a conversation about that here in just a moment. But they did bring in Malik Collins, a good rotational interior defensive lineman, a swing tackle in Cornelius Lucas, another edge in Joy Tryon-Shoyinka, and then a prove-it deal with guys like Tevin Jenkins and some other pieces here. They also traded for Kenny Pickett, which, in hindsight, probably they should not have done. So again, a really quiet free agency, but I think the biggest thing that did happen, of course, was bringing back Myles Garrett. Of course, we all kind of know how this went about. Myles Garrett requested a trade. The Browns did not want to trade him. They tried to talk him back into resigning. He ultimately said no. And then, of course, it just kind of came down to everyone has a price. And Myles Garrett probably had a price too. And I also do think that he wanted more clarity on the quarterback position. And from what I heard, it did sound like the Browns talked with Myles Garrett about what their potential plans were at quarterback. Now, spoiler alert, I do not think that they ever talked to Myles Garrett about them drafting Shedeur Sanders. Now, I do believe that in some way, maybe they mentioned they were going to pick up Dillon Gabriel as like a backup option, but I don't think they ever talked about ever drafting Shedeur Sanders. Because if Shedeur Sanders was in the plan to be drafted by them, I don't think they would have waited till round 5, and not to mention they would not have drafted Dillon Gabriel in round 3. That probably would have been a spot where they would have drafted Shedeur. So I do not think that Shedeur was ever in the conversation for this Browns team. And I don't think it ended up happening until probably on draft night when Shedeur was in round 5. So for Myles Garrett, I don't know how he feels about it. I'm sure he's okay because he probably could still see the future and what 2026 looks like. But I do kind of wonder what his reaction was in round 5 when he saw that Shedeur Sanders was the pick. But just in totality, in terms of what they did this free agency, that was really the only notable thing. It's been kind of a crazy offseason so far with the whole Myles Garrett thing. But once that kind of got settled, you look at everything else and it was a pretty quiet offseason. And frankly, they kind of needed it because they just don't have a ton of money. And frankly, there just wasn't enough free agents for this team to really fix too many of their issues. I will say I would have liked to have seen maybe like 1 or 2 starting level tackles or guards, but they did not do so. And again, it might just come down to a money thing. But real quickly, let's talk about the 2025 NFL draft because this was a pretty interesting draft class to say the least. And it's part of the reason why this is going to be a confusing draft class for me when it all breaks down. Because in round 1, you took Mason Graham, you had the number 2 pick, you traded down. I feel good and bad about that. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Round 2, Carson Schwessinger and Quinshaw Judkins. I think 2 good players. Not the biggest fan of the Carson pick, but I do like the Quinshaw Judkins pick. He was a great player in my opinion. Round 3, Harold Fannin and Dillon Gabriel. And then round 4, Dylan Sampson. Round 5, Shedeur Sanders. So let's go at this one round at a time. Real quick, if you guys do want to see a longer version of this video, I do have a channel called First and 10 is my new podcast. And on there, we just did a full-on Cleveland Browns video. So go ahead and check it out. Link in the description as well as in the pinned comment. Real quick, the Mason Graham conversation. Look, I would have just rather seen this team just stick and pick it with the 2nd overall pick. I would have much preferred them to just simply pick up either one of Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I personally lean towards Travis Hunter because he fixes 2 major issues with this team in either receiver or corner. But if you did prefer Abdul Carter, then pairing Abdul Carter next to Myles Garrett is kind of a no-brainer too. But with that said, they did trade down to pick 5, still got a really good player in Mason Graham, and also got an additional 1st-round pick in next year's draft class, which does seemingly look to be a better quarterback class. My only counter argument with that would be the fact that I felt like the Browns would have been bad enough this upcoming season to where they still would have had like a top 5 pick. And with that top 5 pick, they still could have ended up taking a 2026 quarterback. But if you do believe the Browns will be a better team next year, then having 2 1st-round picks to potentially trade back up a little bit earlier to take a quarterback might also be maybe why they did that move. Basically just to kind of secure the fact they're going to get a quarterback next year. Again, I'm of 2 minds. On one hand, I think Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are way better players than Mason Graham and just better talents in general. But you still have to get a quarterback to get the ball to a guy like Travis Hunter or to, help your defense and Abdul Carter. So with that said, you did trade the pick down. You got Mason Graham, a good talented player to play next to Myles Garrett. And then next year you have 2 first-round picks and what looks to be a better quarterback class, at least on paper. So on one hand, I like it. On one hand, I don't like it. I probably lean a bit more towards liking it more so than not liking it. Pick 33 to me was questionable. I liked Carson Schwessinger. He was in my top 75 big board. I thought 33 was way too early. I thought he would be more of like a late second, early third round pick. He's a good linebacker, and frankly, yes, the Browns could have used an additional linebacker, but I did find it a bit weird that they targeted a round 2 linebacker given all their massive needs at offensive line, at within the edge rushing room, within your receiving core, and all this and that. And you went with a linebacker, especially when you already have Hicks and Koromoa. Now, don't get me wrong, you could definitely find upgrades there, and I think Carson might be an upgrade. It's just at 33, it felt a little rich for me. I did not really think that was a worthy pick there. 36, Quinshon Judkins. I like the pick. I'm a big fan of Quinshon Judkins, so I didn't see an issue with the pick. My only little complaint here with this pick is that I kind of view running back as a position that you can always kind of wait on, like especially when you are a rebuilding team, you can wait on a running back until the next draft. And this is also a pretty deep running class. So in my opinion, maybe you could have passed on Quinshon to prioritize maybe a third round pick on a running back. And then in rounds 2, you could have picked up like a receiver or a tackle, and they didn't do so. So within their first 3 picks, I liked the players. Like Mason Graham's a good player, Carson Schwessinger's a good player, Quinshon Judkins a good player. I just don't love the way they went about it. Right now, Mason Graham, I do like the way they went about getting that one, but getting Carson Schwessinger with 33 was way too early. And I just think taking a running back with the 36th overall pick, given all the issues on this team, was a little bit questionable. Now, again, I'm not mad at what they've done. I'm just saying it's a little bit questionable with how they kind of went about this draft so far. And then really everything else after this, I do also question in a lot of ways. Now, again, I like the players. Harold Fannin, I was not the biggest fan of him, but I could definitely see the talent. I do wonder, though, was getting another tight end that big of a priority for this team, especially when you have such an old offensive line that's so injury prone, and instead you go with what's going to be your second string tight end. Now, yes, you're going to run 12 personnel. You want to have 2 tight end sets. That's cool and all, but man, you could have picked up a tight end in free agency, and with a top 75 pick, taken an offensive lineman who probably could have started for you this year, especially with how many times they get injured. So you're 4 picks in, you haven't taken a receiver, you haven't taken an offensive lineman, you haven't taken another edge rusher. Now, you did take Mason Graham, who was a tackle, but you get my point. And I kind of thought those were their 3 biggest needs, and they haven't really quite addressed any of them. Again, I don't hate the player in Fannin, and I could definitely see how they're going to utilize him in like the 12 personnel, throw him on the outside, let him make some plays, put him next to David Njoku. It's going to be fun, but I don't know. This felt to me like a pick where you needed specifically to address a certain spot like offensive lineman and receiver, and instead you went with something that you didn't really need that badly. And then we get to the Dillon Gabriel pick at round 3, 94 overall. Listen, Dillon Gabriel would have been available in round 4. He might have even been available in round 5. Now, I can't guarantee that, but it was a pretty, in my opinion, relatively deep quarterback class where you could have taken a round 5 quarterback like they did with Shador, funnily enough, but they could have been very satisfied. Like, sure, maybe Gabriel goes ahead of them with their 5th round pick. That's fine. Take a Kyle McCord, take a Will Howard, take a Quinn Ewers was available. Like, take one of those guys because I think all of them were available. Don't quote me on that either. But instead, you spent a, let's be honest, kind of a premier top 100 pick on a backup quarterback. And even then, I don't think even before the Shador Sanders pick was taken, I don't think Dillon Gabriel was ever thought of as their long-term answer at quarterback. Like, I truly do believe they drafted Dillon Gabriel to simply be a backup quarterback. And I get it. You're the Browns. You've had so many issues getting quarterbacks, and whenever it felt like you may have had options at quarterback, it just didn't work out. So having a backup plan is always good. I just kind of question, again, the way they went about it. Spending a top 100 pick on a quarterback you maybe could have got with your 5th round pick in kind of a relatively deep quarterback class. I don't know. I was not a big fan of that pick either, and it gets even worse when we get to, of course, Shador Sanders. The round 4 pick is one of my more favorite picks of the draft. Like, Dylan Sampson falling to 126 was a big time steal, and even though I didn't love the idea of taking running back in round 2 for the Browns, I do like the idea of pairing Quinshon Judkins with Dylan Sampson. Like, that's just going to be such a fun duo, and you also have Jerome Ford there as well. So this team has some nice running backs. I just still wonder, like, hey, we're 6 picks to the draft. You haven't drafted a single offensive lineman nor receiver. I don't know. Kind of weird. And then we get to Shedeur Sanders in round 5. Listen, the value was there. I understand it. Shedeur Sanders should have went way earlier than round 5. His talent, in my opinion, is that of a second round, maybe third round pick. For him to drop to the 5th round, I don't blame the team for just taking a flyer on him. With that said, in a draft class where you're clearly building towards a new quarterback in 2026, you drafted 2 quarterbacks with 2 top 150 picks. Again, I want to reiterate, the value was there. Shedeur Sanders should not have been available in the 5th round, and well, the Cleveland Browns may have taken advantage of it. But this is a team that, let's be honest, even if Shedeur plays well next year, like not great, but well, like has a good rookie season in whatever playing time he does get, I don't think they're going to commit to him as their long-term quarterback. Like, I still believe this Browns team, despite having 5 quarterbacks on the roster right now, is going to at some point draft a quarterback next year. So I just find the whole process to be a little bit weird. Like, this was a team that, in my opinion, should not have been in the market for Shedeur Sanders if you were not going to take him with your first 3 picks. If you didn't take him in round 1 or 2, why would you take him in round 5? It just didn't make a lot of sense to me, especially when you already have Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel already on the roster, and now you're bringing in, let's be honest, a lot of media attention and maybe some unnecessary drama in Shedeur Sanders. And don't get me wrong, Shedeur's a good quarterback. I think that he gets a bad rap, and I like him, I personally. And I'm not going to say I'm like his biggest fan or anything like that. He's not my cup of tea, but I don't hate the guy like a lot of people do. I think he's a good quarterback. It's just I find the whole draft just really bizarre because they had such clear needs, and I don't really feel like they addressed too many of them. Yes, you addressed defensive tackle, but you didn't address the edge rushing room outside of Myles Garrett. Yes, you need a linebacker, but hey, what about another corner? Hey, you needed running back. Okay, what about receiver? Hey, you needed quarterback. Cool, but we wanted a starting level quarterback, and we don't even have any offensive linemen that you feel great about with their future. So I don't know. This draft to me, while I like the players, I like the names, and hell, maybe if you gave these guys in a different order, I'd be a bit more satisfied. I just find the whole process to be very bizarre, especially with how many talented players were on the board here. But okay, let's go ahead and talk about what this offense will look like next year, because I think it's going to be an improved offense. But, I mean, this was a bad offense last year, so it's not saying too much. Now, Deshaun Watson is listed as their starting quarterback, but I do believe at some point it'll either be Flacco or Pickett, and I think by the end of the year, it could be Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, who's not listed here. So I think every single quarterback will get a shot here. That's sort of the good news. Running back room-wise, a big-time upgrade. Samson, Quinshawn, Jerome Ford, that's a nice trio. Receiving core-wise, yes, you bring in Deontay Johnson, but I don't really know what you're getting out of him at this stage of his career. And outside of him, it's literally just Jerry Jeudy, and, I don't know what I'm getting from anybody else. Tight ends, cool. David Njoku, Harold Fannin, that'll work out for you. And offensive line, look, if they're healthy, it's a decent unit. But man, I have a lot of questions with the health of this team. Now, granted, you do have some depth here with Tevin Jenkins, who might end up starting, and Dak Zinner and Cornelius Lucas. So there's some depth and there's some options here. But I don't know. I would have personally just kind of preferred if they would have drafted a young offensive tackle in rounds 2 over the Carson Swessinger pick. Now, let's talk about the quarterback group. Now, there's 5 names we got to talk about. Deshaun Watson, he's probably never going to play another snap in a Browns uniform ever again. So I think you could take him out. You're looking at Flacco and Pickett. I think those two will be competing for the starting job throughout the offseason. If I were to assume who's going to win, I would put my money on Flacco, but I would not hold it against this team to start Kenny Pickett. And then I think there's going to be a competition between Gabriel and Shedeur over who's going to be the quote-unquote third-string quarterback and who's going to be the first in line once inevitably one of the young quarterbacks goes in. Between Gabriel and Shedeur, I do think Shedeur Sanders is the better quarterback. But I will say this, I think a lot of people are discounting Dylan Gabriel. Like, I truly do believe Dylan Gabriel can at some point really push to get a lot of playing time on this team because he's a smart quarterback that can make a lot of good throws, and he's just a good quarterback. Like, that's just what it is. So I don't think that it's just going to be a complete wash of Dylan Gabriel. I do think he has a chance to potentially be, I don't know, something for this team. Maybe not a starter, but like their second string quarterback. And if you are Shedeur, that's your competition. So you have to beat Dylan Gabriel. What I find fascinating is how is this actually going to work out? Like, how are they going to figure out who gets the starting job? Because, I don't know, I mean, they're going to start every single quarterback in a different variety during the preseason. What does training camp look like? Again, this is going to be the story of the offseason. Everybody's going to be watching this team to figure out who's going to be the guy. And there's going to be a lot of people who want it to be Shedeur. There's going to be a lot of people who don't want it to be Shedeur. That's kind of what happens when you bring in some media attention like Shedeur Sanders. But outside of the quarterback room, I do think this is a better unit from last year, because last year the offensive line was so banged up and just not very good when they were banged up. There's a bit more depth there. You have another tight end in Harold Fannin. I think the running game should be a lot stronger. Receiving core is still fairly weak, but I still feel a little bit better about this unit. this was a unit last year that ranked like dead last in several key categories and like points per game and so on and so forth. I don't think it's going to be that bad this year. Just because I don't know who's going to play quarterback, it's kind of hard to predict how good this offense will be because I don't think it's a great offense. But if we assume this team does stay healthy, which is a hard assumption to make because this team has struggled with injuries a lot lately, but if they can somehow stay healthy, I think they'll be like in the 20s in terms of their offense, which is significantly better than where they were last year. And then defensively speaking, it's a very similar unit to last year, but a couple of changes have been made. For starters, the defensive line looks a lot different. It's not as strong as it used to be. The interior, we'll see what Mason Graham looks like. I do believe in him, but I mean, Malik Collins is your number 2, and then you have a couple depth options there as well. Isaiah McGuire is your second. Isaiah McGuire and Shoyinka and Agbo, like those are going to be your opposites of Myles Garrett guys. You're really relying heavily on Myles Garrett to have a big-time year yet again. I feel good about my linebacking core. There's some depth here with Devin Bush and Jerome Baker, but you also have some starters in Schlesinger, Hicks, and Koromoa. Feel good about that. And then my secondary, I would have liked to have seen them draft a safety at some point, but I do feel decent enough about this unit. And then Martin Emerson had a bit of a down year last year. You're hoping for him to kind of step back into a bigger job. So in totality, I don't know if this defense is going to be elite like they used to be, but I think they have enough talent to be a good unit. Like their front seven is okay, especially if Mason Graham can really develop into something nice his rookie year. I just kind of look at it and say, who's going to get pressure opposite of Myles Garrett? Now, sure, they can maybe make a signing here in the next couple of weeks, or they can draft some, or not draft somebody, but trade for somebody, maybe. But as of right now, with what I am seeing on paper, I would like to see another edge rusher. And then, of course, the secondary, I think, has some good names. It's just kind of what does Emerson look like? What does a safety duo look like? So in general, I think this defense will be better from last year. I think in a lot of ways, their defense wasn't particularly great, in large part because of how poor the offense was and just how many times this defense was put into bad situations. I think the offense will be slightly better, which I think will make this defense slightly better as well. I do expect this defense to be around like top 15 next year. So you have like a top 15 defense and some offense that's within the 20s to 25 to the 30 range. So this will be a better team from last year. But I don't think they're going to be like a drastically better team. Like they're not going to go from winning 3 games to like winning 10. Like they're not going to win 10 games. They won't be making the playoffs. They'll be a team that wins somewhere between 4 to like 8 or 9 games, which I think is fine because this team is clearly trying to rebuild towards next year. Now, to end this video off, I did say in the intro that this team confuses me, and you could have heard maybe some of the confusion with the draft. I just don't understand really what this team is trying to put together right now. I did not think their draft class was that of a draft class that screamed they're rebuilding or retooling, when this Browns team clearly should be rebuilding and retooling. It's kind of an older roster. Like this whole offensive line is older. Like Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, those are older players. You look at your tight end, David Njoku, he's getting up there in age. Your quarterback room outside of your 2 young quarterbacks is pretty old in Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. And defensively, you have a lot of guys in their prime who are trying to win now, but because you don't have good quarterback play, you are kind of wasting their primes. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Koromoa, all these other guys. Like these guys are in their prime, ready to fully go in and try to win championships, but this team is not ready yet because of their quarterback room. And when it was pretty clear this team was trying to build toward the 2026 quarterback, I just find it so interesting and kind of confusing as to why they double dipped in quarterback in this year's draft class. Yeah, Shedeur Sanders was good value in round 5. I'm not trying to argue that. But if you knew 100% you're taking a quarterback in 2026, why would you even waste your time with Shedeur Sanders? Now, I don't know who to blame on that pick, whether it was the coach, whether it was the owner, whether it was the general manager, I don't know. But no matter who made the call, I just find it weird. And for Shedeur Sanders' case, I kind of don't think the landing spot was that great either. He has to compete now with 4 quarterbacks, including himself. And let's be honest, they're going to draft a quarterback probably next year unless Shedeur Sanders just absolutely looks incredible. And I don't think he's going to be incredible for this team because it's a not so great and talented offense. So there's a very good chance that this team is in a situation heading into next offseason where Deshaun Watson is either still on the roster or potentially leaving the team. You have Dylan Gabriel as your backup. Flacco probably will retire or, I don't know, go somewhere else. We'll see about Kenny Pickett. But I think there's a chance that heading into next year, this team is drafting a quarterback. And I think the last thing you want to do to a young quarterback is have somebody like Shedeur Sanders who is kind of stealing some of the attention, is stealing the media, is, conflicting fans. It kind of happened a bit last year with Joe Milton and Drake May, where, yes, Milton had the big arm and was flashy, but there was a lot of fans who actually really wanted to see what Joe Milton looked like. And when Joe Milton played fantastic in that Week 17 game, I'm sure there were some Patriots fans who were saying, hey, I want to see this guy play more. So the Patriots went ahead and got ahead of things and traded him away because they knew that Drake May was their starting quarterback. And even though I don't think there was ever any consideration from the Patriots to ever actually fully start Joe Milton, I'm just kind of throwing that situation out to you guys. So hypothetically, let's say the Browns get the first overall pick. They take, I don't know, we'll say Drew Aller, or I don't know if Arch Manning will come out, but any quarterback, right? They bring that guy in, and then all of a sudden now it's a quarterback battle between young young rookie quarterback, young Shedeur Sanders, and young Dylan Gabriel. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be very confused as to who they should root for. Some will want Shedeur to play, some will not. Some will want the rookie to play. And I just don't think you should be doing that to a young quarterback who's probably going to be, more talented than what Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel is. It's part of the reason why I'm just so confused about this. I mean, you have a bad offensive line that cannot stay healthy. It's also older, and their contracts are up here soon. And you didn't really address that in the offseason too much, especially with like young options. You desperately needed help in the edge rushing room opposite of Myles Garrett. You didn't really do that. I mean, you got Shoyinka, but like he's not even probably going to start for this team next year. So I don't know. I felt like they double dipped in wrong positions. They double dipped at quarterback, which was silly. You double dipped at running back, which again, I like Judkins and Sampson, but I don't know. Taking running backs that early was weird. You double dipped at tight end when you already have David Njoku. I just don't know how to feel about it. I feel like this team did not address their major issues, offensive line, receiver, edge rusher, just those core issues. And sure, they have fixed some of their issues. They fixed some of their problems, but man, I feel empty when I look at this Browns team right now. And I feel like, man, I'm missing something with this team. There's just something that's just not right here, and it sucks. I don't really know what it is either. So you guys let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about the Cleveland Browns? Are they primed for a big time year in 2025, or am I right and they'll be an average team and then next year they'll draft a quarterback? You let me know. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.